Hi everyone, Kristen from Media Para One, and it's here today to talk to you about wool. It can be itchy, but it doesn't have to be. And I see this a lot, usually among people that maybe are not knitters or crafters. But even among knitters, a lot of times people are very wary of wool because they automatically think wool itchy. So I wanted to give you my top 5 tips today for avoiding itchy wools or dealing with wools that perhaps are itchier than you would like, but mostly about avoiding them because all yarn costs money and we don't want to spend money on a yarn that's not going to work for us. So without further ado, tip number 1 is to know your wool. Different wools are different levels of itchiness. So probably everybody is pretty familiar with merino, which is one of the softer wools. It's not the only soft wool though. So it is definitely worthwhile getting to know some other kinds of wool that maybe are not quite as soft as merino, but are still perfectly fine to be worn next to the skin. Some other kinds of wool that are relatively soft, cormo, which is I believe a blend of Corriedale and merino. I really like cormo myself. Falkland wool can be pretty soft as well. So definitely it's a great idea to just get to know what different types of wool are out there and read up ahead of time and find out maybe what's going to be, what's known for being itchy and what's known for being softer. So a lot of these itchier wools out there are usually used for things that aren't garments. For example, Blueface Leicester, you will sometimes see it in yarn that is intended for socks because it's very hard wearing, but it's not quite as soft. It might not be something you want in a garment. There are other wools that are specifically used for things like carpeting that really are not, they're not great to be worn, but they do have uses. But it's helpful to go in with a little bit of background knowledge. So get to know different breeds of wool and what wools are known for being soft and which ones maybe to avoid right off the bat. My second suggestion is to understand the structure of yarn. You don't have to be a spinner for this. I know just a bit about spinning, so I'm certainly not an expert. But there are 2 primary ways of spinning wool. There is woolen spun and there is worsted spun. So woolen spun incorporates a lot more air into the process and it is a looser spin. So all of the little maybe prickly parts of the wool are not as tightly held together and smoothed out as they are with a worsted spun, which just, there's less air, it's more condensed, and so those little prickly bits aren't sticking out as much. And the same is true of plying. So the more plies in a yarn, the rounder it is, and the less likely it is for the little prickly bits to stick out and poke you and cause itchiness. So this isn't to say that you need to become an expert on how yarns are spun, but to know before you start looking that a woolen spun yarn, generally speaking, is more likely to be itchy than a worsted spun yarn, and a yarn with fewer plies is more likely to be itchy than a yarn with more plies. It's not very black and white because there are a lot of different elements in play. There's the type of wool and the number of plies and the spin. All of that plays together to determine how soft your yarn is, but to know ahead of time that, okay, woolen spun yarns, generally speaking, are a little itchier. That doesn't mean they're too itchy, but it's something to know ahead of time. Number 3 is to do a skin test. Now, a lot of us, what we do we pick up our yarn, and well, this one's already caked, but we pick up our yarn, we're like, oh, it's soft. Okay, this is not helpful because your hands aren't that sensitive and neither is your face. So what you want to do is to test the yarn, and you can do this in the store, it's okay, against more sensitive places. And appropriate, snowing, the appropriate in public places that you can do that are the inside of your wrist and your neck. So you can take a skein or hank or ball, whatever you want to call it, of yarn at your yarn shop and just run it along the inside of your wrist or your neck a little bit and see how itchy it is. This isn't a guarantee because yarn can feel different when it's in the skein. It can feel different after it's washed and blocked. But if you have a yarn and you rub it against your wrist and you're like, oh my gosh, that's so itchy, chances are it's not going to be substantially less itchy once you have worked it up into your garment. So it's a good, quick jumping off point to test the yarn before you've even left the shop by doing sort of a skin test. Number 4, when you get home, swatch with your yarn. I feel like every one of my tutorials is like, you have to swatch, but you do, and there's so many different reasons for it. And this is one of them. So you want to know what the yarn is going to be like once it is actually knit up, and you want to know before you actually knit it into your project. So make a swatch for all of the reasons plus this. Wash and block your swatch like you would with your garment. And then once it's dry, again, you can do a skin test like this, but now that the yarn is at home in your house or wherever you live, you can test it a little bit differently. And so a suggestion that I have seen many times, I personally have not done this because I am not super sensitive to itchy wools. Take your swatch, put it in your bra, assuming that you wear a bra, or if not, under the waistbands of your underpants, whatever, in an area that's more sensitive, and wear it like that for a couple of hours and see how you do. Again, this is something that you want to do before you commit to making an entire garment out of that yarn. What I will say is this is a little tricky if you have bought yarn for a whole sweater and you swatch and you find out that you actually don't like it next to your skin. Now you have a whole sweater quantity. But if you don't buy that whole sweater quantity, then you may miss out on a dye lot. So my suggestion for you is to have backup plans for your yarn. Maybe you've bought it for a sweater that you're planning to wear, close to the skin. Maybe that doesn't work, but you could still use it for a sweater that is going to be an outer layer. Or you can use it to make hats, or you can use it for somebody maybe who's not so sensitive to wool. So have a backup plan for your yarn if you are buying large quantities at once. But still, the swatching is really going to help you determine ahead of time. I don't know, I've worn this next to my skin for 2 hours and it's red and itchy and this is not going to work. And the last one, if you have bought this beautiful yarn and you're just determined to use it, but it is still too itchy, something you can try. And first, the swatching will help you with this because when you wash and block your swatch, when you wash it, you should use wool wash, and that's going to tell you how the wool reacts to that. Wool wash is specifically designed for it, and it might soften up. Something else you can also try is actually hair conditioner. Again, I have not done this myself. I have not needed to, but I have heard from other people that it does work. And you're just going to use regular, hair conditioner. Probably want to avoid those conditioners like that I use that are for blonde hair. I don't know what that's going to do for your wool, but just a regular hair conditioner, and you would add it to water and then soak whatever it is you have knit, and it may soften it up. So this is sort of one of these last ditch efforts. You've knit the whole garment, but it's just not soft enough. And give it a try. I do not have a tutorial on this, but I have seen a number of them out there. So you can go ahead and just do a search for that. But a last ditch effort, hair conditioner to soften up your itchy wool. And that is what I have for you in this tutorial, 5 tips for avoiding itchy wool.